All right. My name is Robert Diamante, and I will be hosting tonight's Literally Alive titled The Art of Literal Books. We will be talking with the designer of Literal Books, austere catalog, as well as a poet and printmaker who has had two beautiful editions published by Literal Books. Together, we will learn how a book comes to life, and I am sure we will be treated to a poem or two. So I'd like to introduce artist and designer Lori Harley, who found her calling in art making when she was a child. During her study of graphic design at Portland School of Art, now Maine College of Art and Design, she found a home for her delight in solving visual puzzles, her attention to detail, and her love of language. Lori continues to be invigorated by the discoveries she makes while giving words and works voice in the world, especially during the past 5 years via book design. When not in her studio, you'll find her gardening, writing, creating art and music, dancing, and exploring the beauty that surrounds us. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you, Robert.
Leslie Moore is a poet, printmaker, and pen and ink artist whose eye is often caught by animals. Her writing has appeared in journals and anthologies. Her art may be found in book illustrations, private collections, at the local color gallery in Belfast, Maine, and at the Wendell Gilley Museum in Southwest Harbor. She is the winner of a Maine Literary Award for Short Nonfiction in 2018. Leslie is the author of Grackledom and What Rough Beasts, both designed by Lori Harley and published by Littoral Books. Leslie, I think it would be fitting if you began with a poem to start us off.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Welcome.
I'll read a poem from my book, Grackledom, which Lori designed, and I'm going to read this poem because it's on one of my favorite pages in the book that Lori designed, and I think she might show it to you a little later. This is called Great Blue. The heron lifts off its granite pedestal with primordial grandeur, a pterodactyl come back to life. Ponderous but aloft, it skims the bay with giant wing beats, head tucked, neck coiled, legs trailing. I too want to rise from this rocky shore, redeemed and flap into the great blue beyond.
Thank you, Leslie. Hey, Leslie, would you show us would you hold up the flat for us? Oh, that's beautiful. Lori, so when you receive a manuscript, like what are the steps you go through, and maybe use what Leslie just showed us as an example?
I'll just start by just talking a little bit. Yeah, Agnes and Jim will give me a manuscript, and also since they've obviously already spent lots of time with the manuscript that they're giving me, they will oftentimes have some ideas about maybe in a case other than Leslie's, like maybe an artist that whose work can help support the book, or just ideas about um, um, how to separate the book out into chunks. But in Leslie's case, receiving her manuscript, it included basically I'm going to call it a loose roadmap that she had created for the flow of her work, and the taking the images that she wanted me to be able to consider, and making suggestions as to where those could fit in the manuscript, what poems they could sit opposite or with. And so I gathered that all up, and just started filling my head with her imagery, and so in this case, because the imagery is Leslie's, the words are Leslie's, I had the opportunity while I was looking at her work to start getting a feel for what is the nature of her work. It's very graphic. There are a lot of bold lines, black figures really heavily, um, thick borders, which I found to be really visually lush and wonderful containers for her work. I mean, the often with many of the um, much of the print work, the borders figure into the whole piece very prominently. And so that started me thinking about typography um, and how can I find text typography. And now I'm gonna bring up the screen that shows.
I have to say something while you're doing that,
Oh,
Lori, that
yes.
when I sent my first book to the Ellsworth American to Letitia Baldwin to review it, she asked me, "Oh, what family of fonts, what package does Lori use? What suite?" As if she just picked something off the shelf, and I checked with Lori to say, "What suite did you use?" He said, "Well, I didn't. I made it up." And Letitia was so impressed by that she had just picked and chosen these fonts. So go ahead and show us the
Yeah,
fonts.
yeah. So let me see. Okay, I'm sharing
I
screen.
have a question while you're pulling that up. Can I break in here? So,
Absolutely.
did you give? Oh, that's so cool. That is so beautiful. Did you give Lori like a rough outline of or a rough direction of I guess the cadence of the book?
I sent Lori what I thought was a very humble Word document, and 2 months later, she sent me back a bound proof of my book that was just absolutely gorgeous. So I did put things in sections. Each book is in 3 sections, and I did throw in images wherever I thought they would fit. But she was just full of surprises and totally blew my mind when I got what she did, because it was so inventive and so unique. And she clearly not only appreciated the images, which I thought she would do because she's a graphic artist, but she had read the poems and understood them and intuited them and made the image and the poem fit together so well, like this. The image scoops into the poem.
Yeah. So this image I think is a really good example of how um, I guess uh, again this book is so unique in that this is your work, that this is your visual work, these are your words. And so I wanted the book experience for the viewer to feel like you had created this book. Like that this book is an extension of your work.
Uh-huh.
And so with the typography, I really wanted to, I selected this font, which you see with the title Great Blue. I don't know if you can see me gesturing here. Um, that to me, that text feels like your borders. It hints at your borders. And then the text, the typeface that I chose for the poetry itself just has a lot of uh, it has a lot of texture to it. The edges are it looks hand hewn,
Mm-hmm.
and um, so I just wanted the text to mirror what you're doing with your line work, or
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation with it, be an extension of it. And with this particular piece of artwork, your artwork did not have this artwork does not have a border per se, but in the artwork we did in the original, we saw the edges of where um, uh, the linoleum.
This actually was a woodcut, so that would
Okay,
be the edge of the wood.
okay, where the edge of the wood was. Um, and what I what I saw was that I needed to, in order for the conversation to happen more fluidly between the words and the artwork, I actually took the artistic license of removing some of the edges
Mm-hmm.
of the artwork so that it could create a free bow and arc and push into your words so that it felt like there was more of a cupping happening and a conversation between the two things.
Leslie, can you talk a little bit? This question flows in to that comment, Lori.
Mm-hmm.
Can, for those of you that don't know your work intimately, can you talk about your work?
Well, I started out doing wood block prints, but I mostly do linoleum block prints now, and I use pretty much the reduction method, which means I use one block of linoleum, carve a little bit out, print the first color, carve a little bit more out, print another color, and continue this process through the colors until the print is done. So often the last print is what's called the key block print. It's a print in black, and you really don't know what it's going to look like until you've printed the key block. For example, the grackle here was just a bunch of colors, blobs of color, before I printed the black to give it the definition. So it's always a surprise at the end. And I I learned a lot about presenting my images to Lori because she was very fussy about my photography. And then I finally ended up taking them to be professionally scanned. And she kept saying, don't crop them, because she liked my borders, she liked my edges, and she didn't want me to manually crop them. So I was interested to see how, with some, she led the image right out to the edge of the page. Others, she had it bordered. I always guessed that she created the size of this book to fit the size of my images, because a lot of them are vertical up and down, and just fit into the page perfectly.
Mm,
Oh,
mm.
that,
Yeah, I made the all of the same heights,
Mm,
mostly.
mm,
Like for this, the Great Blue, um, because you hadn't created an actual border, it felt more freeing to just let it
mm,
flow
yeah,
across the pages. Whereas there are other situations where maybe you had a border, but we're cutting off the very edge of the border, so we couldn't see the contour of the soft human carving border of the edge.
yeah.
And that's definitely something that is so valuable to me as a viewer. I want to see those kinds of edges.
Mm.
Um, I wonder if this might be a good time to also just um, uh, go to the front cover that you just showed. This comparison really speaks to the process. For instance, the artwork that Leslie created is here on the left of the grackle, and I knew that Leslie wanted that to be on the front cover. And so I'm like, okay, well, okay. So I need to put in words there, and this is the size book we have and the proportions, and how am I going to get that to all fit without feeling like on the front cover you have like an image that's in a little box, and then you have the title. And I really wanted again, for this cover and for the What Rough Beasts, I wanted it to look like, Leslie, you had created this cover. Like, what would Leslie have printed for the cover if she had, been able to carve this all out? And so I took the image and I started figuring out how does it fit proportionally. And so I'm gonna need extra space above the head. So this is where um, you as the artist kind of, you have this mystery in your printmaking process where you don't really know how everything's going to come together until you put that black plate, you print the black plate on the top, and then similarly giving the manuscript over, like, oh, okay, what's going to happen to my work now?
Mm-hmm. And
And
this sideways titling is a motif you've used throughout both of my books, which I love. It's on the covers, it's section headings in the tables of contents.
yes, and so that started. So yeah, so I'm like, well, okay, where do I fit Grackledom here? Where am I going to put the subtitle and the so manipulating, taking license to manipulate how what how will it look almost like Leslie created it this way, but the that text treatment really originated in What Rough Beasts. And here's another kind of, here's the artwork, and then what did I do with it to make it into a front cover? Um, uh, and so the beginning of the vertical type came from the rough in What Rough Beasts, because when I read that title, um, I really was struck by the way the meaning of it can flip flop in your mind. Like you can read it as the way I read it was what beasts. And I really wanted people to be able to read it as both the amazement of what beasts and what rough beasts. So that is how that was born, putting words on the edge like that, or vertically like that. Um, and then taking license to add this, like if Leslie had carved out a spot for poetry prints in the bottom right hand corner, what would that look like? So
Mm-hmm.
using the contours of your artwork to actually simulate cutting into that
Mm-hmm. And then
area.
she doesn't have this showing, but she also order all
Oh
the way
yeah, it wraps.
around, spread it out so it goes all the way around the back of the book.
Right, right. Because I'm like, well, surely, you would have done that had you been making a full
Mm-hmm.
cover. So
Yeah, and you always guessed right too. I mean, it was like you were inside my head, and but also surprising me too in wonderful ways what
mhm,
you
mhm.
did.
I'm very pleased about that. And then here again, I was like, okay, how can we? So many of the pieces inside are in color, but the artwork for this particular bear was not in color. So how could I add color that would give depth and kind of give a hint to the fact that the interior was going to be in color? Um, and I was so pleased by inadvertently, no, 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 inadvertently, the color that you used for the artwork for Grackledom, and that which was on What Rough Beasts, they sing so nicely
They
together.
do. I wonder if that was
I
unconscious.
think, yeah,
It
that was
might
like,
have been. Yeah, they go to.
Leslie, oh, I'm sorry for interrupting. I
no,
have a
no,
question.
no.
Carl Little, actually, and it sort of ties in with what we're talking about. So I wanted to break in. Um, he's curious to know what comes first, your poems or the print, or the print or the poem.
I'm not consistent in any way. Sometimes I write the poem first and the print comes after. Sometimes I make the print and the poem comes after. Um, with the print, you can see behind my head. I wrote a poem first about cormorants, and then I made that print, and then I wasn't quite done, so I wrote another poem based on that print. So sometimes I make prints and no poem comes out of it. Sometimes I write poems and no print comes. So there's really no consistency.
And that,
I think you have that picture of
I
the.
do have that one.
There's another question too in chat. If somebody could read that, I'm having a difficult time pulling that up. Oh, wait, no, here it is. We have a question from Sarah Lynn Eastler. Leslie, do you begin by writing or creating art and then seeing what patterns are emerging, or are you to begin with an idea or a full collection in mind?
I, I think all of my ideas come from encounters with animals, either in the wild or at the park here in Belfast, or watching a video, reading a news story. It all comes from some encounter. And usually before I start writing a poem or even before I begin a print, I do a lot of research about that animal because I want to learn as much as I can about them. So I do research. The Cornell Labs bird app is wonderful, and I get a lot off of Wikipedia. Um, and it informs both the writing, gives me it gives me details to put into poems and information, and it also informs the prints because I've usually got a very distinct image in my mind of what I want to create. Like this bear tore down our bird feeder outside our bedroom window once in the middle of the night. And I had such a clear picture because he didn't care about us being there at all or the dog howling at him. um, I wanted to find that image, recreate that image. So I look at a lot of images of bears and watch videos of bears. And I actually sort of got that swagger of his by stopping a video mid thing and making a screenshot, which I've learned I can do, which is wonderful. So yeah, it all gets mixed up. The writing, the researching, the printing, the carving. Does that answer your question?
I think that was a great response. And if anybody has more questions or would like more detail, please type it into the chat. Um, I'm gonna. I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I'm curious about the process Lori goes through in general. And I'd like to get back to Grackledom and What Rough Beasts, but Littoral also publishes fiction and anthologies. And Lori, I'm just curious, like when Agnes and Jim hand you, say for instance, like an anthology, the
Mm-hmm.
anthology, like what is your process? Do you read all of them? Are you what are you thinking of?
Well, with an anthology of multiple people's work, it's more complicated. If it's a collection of one person's work, um, it's easier to get a feel for, um, what is the common thread. Um, um,
That's that I think that answers that. Yeah, what's the common thread?
yeah, what's the common thread? And particularly, again, if it's a singular person's work, um, I really I'm reading and paying great attention to what images the author is conjuring in my own head, and what associations start happening in my own head as a reader. Um, and um,
I think of soft features like actually is a really good sample example of that. I don't know if you have that book in front of you, but like the
I do.
radio cast. Um, I didn't mean to send her off on a task, but I
No,
thought
I have a whole one. Yeah, soft features. So this is a great example of the
maybe theme. Is it a theme of some kind in the book?
it's this is a conceptual rather than the image itself being conjured by the author's words per se. I mean, I guess it was in that Um, you know, we're talking about radio broadcasts.
Right, Coraline was a the narrator, the lead character was a uh, broadcaster for the
Yeah,
main
a radio journalist. Um,
journalist.
and so this, in my mind, what was coming together in my mind was the lead character's relationship to everything that she was reporting, that she became overwhelmed by all of the horrible news that she had to report and research. And so it created this turmoil in her own self. And so the primary read here is the radio tower, and signals going out. But the secondary read for me, which is more subtle and subjective, is that I wanted the tower to have the suggestion of being a form, a human form, somebody standing, the head on top, and just, you know, information is going out, but it's also coming in and it's getting all um, it's creating this overwhelming jumble.
Like a chaos of sorts.
Chaos,
Yeah.
yes. So
Um,
that was
very.
yeah, that's what we're talking about there.
How do you arrive? Wendy Patterson wants to know how you arrive at like size of a book.
The size of the book, we really standardized, really. Uh, like novels have become a certain size. Uh, Poetry books, poetry anthologies in the or the contemporary main poetry series are 6 by 9. So those are the biggest ones. And then the little, what I call the minis, which are these little sweet, unusual, uncharacterizable or harder to characterize books. Um, so we have so 3 sizes plus the big one, which is the um, A Dangerous New World.
Uh,
That's the very large format, full of artwork and um, uh, poetry, essay, that
yeah.
sort of thing. So it's I mean, there's some practical reasons for choosing those different sizes. Um,
But really, there's a standard that you like a trade standard of sorts that you
a
follow.
trade standard of sorts, and then like a literal books standard
Ah,
of sorts. I mean, there are also there uh, there are certain efficiencies of certain sizes production wise. Um, the printer we use, like the sweet spot is a 6 by 9. Um,
does that limit the number of pages at all? Well, Wendy Patterson has, I guess, very practical questions about numbers of pages and so forth. Is that ever a concern?
well, numbers of pages came up. Uh, that did come up at one point with, we were wondering, can we produce Monkey?
We did.
Which is a very large book. And for this book, production wise, making sure that there was enough, that it wouldn't become too unwieldy. We went even with a thinner paper, so that not only would you not end up with a ginormous spine, but also you wouldn't be overwhelmed by thicker paper. Does that make sense? Like the thinner the
Yeah.
book, the thicker the paper we use to make sure that your reading experience, that it just still, it feels substantial and has a nice hand feel.
Well, quality, I mean, there's no question like the quality of literal books is pretty high. Um, the paper quality, the obviously the illustrations, the artwork, and Leslie, we're coming back to you very shortly here. There's also one more signature, and then we'll pass it off to you because I'd love to hear another poem.
Mm.
Hopefully, willing to read another poem. But there's a signature that Littoral Books has used consistently, and do you know where I'm going with this, Lori?
The
Is it the
yes,
fly? You call
it
it the
all
fly?
it all started with the fly leaves of the first book. Um, goodness. So with Balancing Act Two, um, I
Maybe,
just
there you
sorry.
go. No, no, no. I'm
With Balancing Act Two, I this is a book full of women poets' work, and um, I really I felt compelled to punctuate it. No offense to all the women out there with pink. I punctuated it with this two, this pink, Balancing Act Two, and um, and I really wanted there to be a signature element, or something that would help you open the book and see that you weren't in for just any other poetry book, and that led to this first use of um, these translucent pages used as fly leaves. Um,
We have a yellow one.
and then there's a yellow one in What Rough Beasts. And then they've evolved to do slightly different things. Some of them are uh, purely a color. Some of them have artwork on them in enough. Um, they actually do something. I tried this out earlier. I think you can actually see it. So if you look really carefully, these hands that are printed on the yellow flyleaf are covering something up that's behind them. So what you see between the hands is no exclamation point. And then when you um, when you move that flyleaf away, you see that they were covering enough. Um, and then there are, um, and then sometimes there's other supportive artwork, like on Monkey. There's a flyleaf that has um, the monkey on the balloon there. And then oftentimes there's something a little different that happens um, on the back flyleaf um, as an ending parting, uh,
almost like a curtain coming down to some
a
extent.
curtain coming down, completing a thought.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, what did you use for Grackledom?
Recordum used.
The
There
wolf.
we go. Yes.
You can see through it,
Ah, wow.
Yeah.
and you
And
can see
that only
the
has,
title
yeah. Yes.
in there amongst the tree branches showing through.
Yeah. So there, I, yeah, you can see Grackledom sticking out from behind there.
Mm.
Um, Basically, as a reader, as an experiencer of my book of books myself, and really an experiencer of the world, I so appreciate when there's attention to detail and that those details support the whole. It just makes me feel like I'm immersed in something that somebody really cared about. um, and so um, here's a detail that uh, gets to the cormorants behind Leslie. I'm going to share that. When I saw that poem, I just really, I wanted it to become a full conversation between the poem and the artwork. Um, and now we get the birds are interacting and pointing to the poem, and it's just um, that those are the kinds of details that I'm looking out for and trying to bring to the fore. And so
I love that page. I love what you did with it. It was brilliant.
What I love, Lori, about this is you're not afraid to crop the Leslie's prints are precious. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
hanging on the wall, I wouldn't crop out anything, but you're not afraid to use cropping as a device to do exactly what you just explained, like point to the poem. Um, I'd like to read a comment actually from Nancy Walters, also extolling your praises. It's each time a literal book comes out, how lucky the press is to have you, Lori. So
oh,
there has so much trust between the writer and you. A designer can, in my opinion, ruin or elevate any given book, and I think that you've elevated numbers of books. And Kate Kearns wants to point out that the flyleaf on her book, "You Are Ruining My Loneliness," and we'll be talking with Kate next month, deconstructed the cover art in a really cool way.
um,
No.
yes, 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 yes.
She's gotta go get it.
Leslie, I'd like to bring it back to you.
Mhm.
And I'd love to hear another poem and
Yeah.
to see more of your works in the book.
Yeah, I did. I have to share one story before I read a poem because I noticed Gary Lawless is with us.
Please.
He and I had a conversation about working with Lori after our first two books had come out. His How the Stones Came to Venice and mine, What Rough Beasts, and we both said we just sent our books off and without any almost no input from us at all, Lori created this glorious book and sent it back to us, and it was just knocked our socks off and surprised us totally. But there it was. She read the books, she understood them, she put in all these details that made it so much better, and we were both pleased with what she did. Um,
Thank you. So, I mean, that's the highest praise because that is, I see that as my job to take what's given to me and do this.
mm-hmm.
And with your work, sometimes that was like uh, seeing seeing how your images speak to each other, and um, is whenever you have more than one element on a page, they start talking to each other. So how do these talk to each other? No, they're fighting a little bit, or oh, if I crop X off, then they play well with each other. And that gets to what Robert was saying about being willing to crop can really reveal some interesting relationships that might not have come to the fore without cropping, for example. Um,
I have a dangerous question now, and it's for you, but it's actually for Leslie. Did you have a favorite poem, a favorite flat, or a poem that you'd like Leslie to read?
well, I mean, in terms of flats, I mean, the cormorants, I really, I would like that to be a print that's maybe this big. I would like that. That's where I think, wouldn't it be cool to have Leslie's like a whole sleeve of works that are 1117 or something? They would be artwork combined with poetry, and that would be the product. Like here, um, um, so yeah.
Should I
Um,
read that poem? I'll read Cormorants
yeah,
because
do.
you've showed it.
Please.
Cormorants. Wing feathers like glossy black vestments, scalloped in silver, raised in benediction over tide-stained pulpits, the sea wreathed in smoke, epiphany of a metallic sun breaking through. I really thought of them as ecclesiastic after I finished that print, but since I've done it, I've also come to think of them as more like kabuki actors. They're so
What do you
exaggerated and so dramatic.
What do you mean by ecclesia? That's such an interesting comment. What did you
Yeah,
mean?
they look like they're worshiping the sun, and they look like they're in their robes, and you know how when the minister raises his arms and his all
Oh, wow.
his all his vestments fall. They just reminded me of that, and they look like they're standing on pulpits. The smoke, the incense is rising around them. But there is something very Japanese about them too.
Yeah, they're so graceful and elegant.
I'll read the other poem about cormorants because it's when my husband likes Tom because he has a speaking role in it. Some of you know my husband, Tom Moore. It's called Shags and Solitude. Cormorant, Corvus marinus, sea raven. 17 shags balance on the high wire that spans the Passagasawake at the Narrows, where the upper bridge used to be. They shuffle flat, webbed feet, better suited for swimming than perching, teeter, face down river, beaks tilted into the breeze. Some preen feathers with hooked bills hang inky wings out to dry. They croak companionably, shit milky streams of guano. A mile upriver, on a quiet inlet, a lone shag straddles a dead limb over the water. Maybe the others were mean to him, Tom says. We chuckle, but I want to stand with this bird, escape the crowd, its glib camaraderie. Let my thoughts slow to the flow of the river. There, that's for Tom.
I also just appreciate the respect that exudes from your words and the way you observe the birds, any creatures you're writing about. There's just I just feel like there's a respect that comes out of that that's very apparent, which I appreciate. And highlighting details that people might not otherwise, very likely might not otherwise notice. Yeah.
The way that you structured Grackledom, uh, uh, this is a question for both of you. Lori, you interpreted what Leslie gave you, and Leslie, you obviously had a sort of a sense of how you wanted to structure the book. Um, I think in your PDF, I think I saw some flats in there of your chapter headings. Can you share some of those? I think that's what I saw.
Yeah. There are, let's see. So we have very specifically here's a lineup of the chapter headings for What Rough Beasts, um, uh, where you really see how that vertical text um, started having a relationship with Leslie's artwork. And my favorite of these three separators is Visitations, because when I looked at the Leslie's drawing of the raccoon, I really appreciate the raccoons are kind of like little bandits, and they're they're wily and resourceful and sneaky, and so I it was fun to play with putting type slightly over so that um, there's a change of planes. There's a foreground and a background, and the visitations is in front of. Like I feel like there's a little hiding behind the visitations, a little. Um,
He's being very surreptitious behind there. He's kind of being a
yeah,
little
like I
raccoon
got. I have
sneaking in.
this. I have this strawberry I found. So
Don't strawberry.
so the relationship felt like to me that I could punctuate the personality that Leslie was bringing out in her drawing. Um, and then I also have um, this spread from Grackledom right here, which has the separator page, one of the three separator pages in this book, opposite this lovely poem to an artist who died too soon. And
That page that you did just broke my heart. Those feathers falling just makes me want to cry every time I see it. That was pure Lori. She did that.
well, it just, yeah, after reading your words, I thought you had suggested using the feather with this poem, but it seemed to me like that feather needs to that feather can do something to illustrate your words.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's
Leslie,
that's a brilliant example of what she does. You know, I gave her one feather and she made them work.
would you read this?
Sure. To an artist who died too soon. You'll come back as a bird, perhaps the hawk you added to a painting, a fierce afterthought, wingspan too wide for the canvas. Or your mighty hummingbird, connoisseur of color, territorial, full of zip and drive, heart thrumming 10 times a second. Or the blue jay, smart, sassy, spirited, trickster and tyrant, loyal to your tribe, fruit-faced with a berry in your beak. Or the barn owl, piloting the seasons, gliding through the gloaming, wind silent in your wings. Or your heron, humping over Little River, great blue downbeats, head tucked, neck coiled, legs trailing. When red-tail hawks kettle over the blueberry barrens, soaring high, high, higher still, I'll know you are among them. That's for Sally.
Yeah, that's so sweet.
I'd like to read a couple comments from Nicole Detremont. Thank you, Lori. Your work is a portal into the writer or poet's world. It is what the reader first sees. And then Annalise Jachimides has to say, I tell everyone these are the most beautiful, compelling books, and I have to agree with that, Annalise. Everyone, thank you for how you bring your whole self to the making. That's the magic.
Mm.
Lori, this might be a prosaic question, but can I ask you like more like in terms of like some of your other design work? Are you doing exclusively books now? Is that really where your focus is?
No, no, I'm not exclusively doing books. I'm still doing all the other designery things. Um, um, I have I have worked with directly with some authors on books, uh, but I'm only working with Littoral Books as a publisher, and I mean the experience between those two things is very those two channels are very different. Um, for one thing, with Littoral Books, I feel like I'm being exposed to so much writing that I would not never otherwise be exposed to. Um, um, and
Were you a fan of poetry before? I mean, did you read a lot of poetry?
no, not at all.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I
No,
probably started.
it's true. I don't. I didn't. No, and I think that's okay. I'm gonna give myself a pass on that. I think that's okay. But what really opened the door for me to poetry was um, the first time I heard Martin Steingesser um, perform his work. Um, Maine's one of Maine's poet laureates many years ago, and that really opened the door to me to this idea that um, a poet reading their own work out loud can really it's a for me it was the doorway into poetry. All of a sudden it felt more accessible and more just having the words come through the author, getting a better sense for exactly what the writer was meaning, or being able to compare what I was hearing versus what I had experienced in my own head reading. Um, they're two very different experiences. Um,
What's next for Laura in terms of design and literal books?
for me, I am working on the ninth in the Contemporary Maine Poetry series. Um, uh, I'm working on the ninth book in this series called Bedtime Stories by Steve Langan. And so that's, yeah, yet another completely different writing style and a whole new set of um, visual relationships to explore. Um, yeah,
Steve is going to be with us next month on Literally Live with Kate Kearns, just FYI to the listening audience. So join us then. We'll be doing a Valentine's broadcast and we'll have some special guests who will be announced later. Um, so, but I want to, Leslie, what are you working on? Like, what's next for you?
Well, a week from Friday, I will be the guest speaker at the Bowdoin Library Special Collections. They will be turning the page of the double elephant folio edition of John James Audubon's Birds of America. There's 120 copies of this folio, which is huge. And it's in a glass case there at the library. And once a month, they pull it out of the glass case and turn the page very carefully to the next page. So I will be there. They call it the flipping the bird ceremony.
that's great.
I will be there and turning to the fish hawk or the osprey page. And I happen to have a poem about a fish hawk.
Would you read it? Can you read it?
Sure,
Do you have it available?
I do. Let's see, it's Ode to an Osprey. Oh, to be so far-sighted as to see what I want from aloft, a glint in bright waters. Oh, to be so bold as to fold my wings into free fall, no hesitation, no doubts, to be chillingly exact, raising my wings, lifting my legs in the last breath, deft enough to rake the surface with hooked claws, spiky feet, to sweep what I'm after right out of the water, and then rise on wild downbeats, shimmy my load into alignment, head first, no drag. Oh, to wing back to my eyrie, catch clinched in steel talons. And there's a little picture of an osprey.
Magnificent. And you'll be reading that at the
I
flip.
will. My friend Margie Matter is holding up her woodchuck non grata that she's had for many years.
Wonderful.
One of my prints that's in What Rough Beast.
And I will admit, I just bought one of your prints at the gallery in Belfast. I was very, very pleased to. I'm the proud owner of your crow.
Mm-hmm.
Lori and Leslie, in the last few minutes that we have, what else would you like to say to one another or about the collaboration?
I think we have to get together more often, Lori.
That's right.
We need to sit down and really talk sometime. And you've got some good ideas, and I like that idea of a folio next time that you could pull out these prints.
That would be very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I could help help make that happen.
I know. You can do anything, I'm sure.
Leslie, would you just hold up What Rough Beasts and Grackledom and just kind of flip through and show off Lori's wonderful work? Like sort of in totality, just when you purchase the book, you're getting like prints and it's just like a whole package. It's unbelievable.
For this poem, she took the border off one of my prints and used it to border this poem. I said, how did you do that? The same great blue herons are in both books, but this one had a swirly color background. That was a woodblock. I put it on a Lazy Susan and spun it around with the brayers to make that. But there are actually there are more colors. There's more prints in this one. This is Grackledom. Here's one of the page.
I love that.
Riders. Loon shadow, loon shadow.
May I also offer up Dog Dreams? I so love this. I feel like this Cora, you captured Cora so beautifully.
The soulful hound dog. Yeah, Grackledom has a whole section of cats and dog poems. For 25 years, I've done pet portraits, people's dogs and cats, and I wanted to find a way to use them. So I had poems about cats and dogs, and there's my cockapoo, Rumi, and his friend Lizzie, Linda Buckmaster's cat.
Oh.
She lives up the street. Lori, you should tell them about the banners. People were asking what else you do besides books. She just created these 8 spectacular banners for Linda Buckmaster.
Yeah. I designed a book for Linda first, from which we launched off and designed banners that would continue and support that. Oh, yes.
Elemental.
Elemental. And so we developed these banners they're 3 feet by 5 feet. They're cloth banners, and she's installing them in different libraries around the state, and they'll stay in each library for a month or 2, depending on the library, and uh, they talk about salt cod and fishing um, um, and are meant to just illuminate the subject for people in a fairly brief way. Oh, I see somebody.
Yeah, Carl was coming.
Carl.
They're now in Northeast Harbor at the library there.
Yeah, I will very quickly try and bring up the banners if I have a moment to do that.
I have to say, Linda lives up the street from me, and when my first book came out, What Rough Beasts, I was praising Lori to the hilt about designing it. And what did Linda do but run right down to Portland to Lori and have her design her book as well?
Yes.
I take credit for that collaboration.
You should. You absolutely facilitated that. Fine. This lineup.
I think have time for one banner. We can go a little bit over tonight if you don't mind. Share a banner, and then I'd like to announce the next Literally Alive, and then we can all sign off for the night and go
Okay.
have a proper supper.
Yes. 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 Um, 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 Sidebars. Maybe, yeah, I was not prepared for that. Well, uh, they're very small here, but so you'll see them all lined up together. So these are, yeah, they're each, oops, they're each 3 by 5. So they're pretty, it's a pretty uh formidable display. Um, and depending on the particular library, they'll be spaced and paired um, in different flows to fit the space.
These are
Um,
beautiful, Lori. Wow, I want to see those up close.
And that's my codfish on the left
yes, that's Leslie's codfish.
with his
Absolutely.
barbells, the little whiskers sticking down from his mouth.
Oh, well, lots of praise in the chat for tonight's program, and for Leslie for your poetry, and Lori for your beautiful design. Thank you both so much. Great
You.
competition, great show. And I just want to remind everybody that we do Literally Live once a month. And next month, we will be speaking with Kate Kearns and Steve Langham with special guests to be announced on Valentine's Day. So join us then. Sign up for the mailing list if you're not on our mailing list already, and we'll be seeing you next month. Any final words?
Go
Thank you
forth
all for
and
coming.
write more.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming. Yeah.
We really appreciate you dropping in.
Leslie, thank you. And Lori, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for helping us keep afloat.
Mm.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Don't get rid of us.